Well, good day, viewers. Today we have another Mercedes here. It's been here for other work in the last couple months. This is a new condition. Well, the customer actually brought it here because the brake warning message was coming up, but now on the way here he has a battery indicator light which probably indicates the battery's not charging. So we're going to connect a voltmeter and an ammeter and see if we're getting an output from the alternator. So as you can see with it running, it's 11.68 volts, 69 volts. Flat line. The belt is on it and it's spinning. It has a self-tensioner. Now it does have a one-way clutch on the alternator down there, so I suppose that clutch could be slipping, but usually when they slip they make noise. Let's see if there's any diode ripple at all. Probably not, because there is. So we have to look at the electrical circuits of this vehicle and see if there's any supporting wiring that we need to qualify at the alternator. It's not that convenient to get to down there. It looks like the connector right on top. And then check out the availability of an alternator. So here's the electrical circuit for this 2008 Mercedes-Benz ML320. It's the 3-liter CDI. I don't want to call it 320. Wouldn't that be 3.2 liters? Well, whatever. According to this, it's 3 liters. And I'm going to go into the charging circuit diagram here. Let's bring this up. So the alternator's down at the bottom here, and we have main feed wire coming in. Looks like it's tied into the same circuit as the starter. And looks like there's 3 wires coming in there. One goes to the glow plugs. Now when I started it up, I didn't pay attention to whether the glow plugs came on or not, but that would be beneficial. There is a wire going off to the front signal acquisition module under the passenger front seat. That's like a BCM that does something to the charging system, probably communicates to the instrument cluster across the CAN bus as to whether it's charging properly. And then there's another wire here to pin 1, and it's got 2 options, 1 and 2. One is 3-liter and 3-liter turbo, which this is, and that goes to the CDI control module and also to the glow plug control module. It's a LIN bus wire. So this looks like a communication wire as well. I don't know what UN stands for. Now it's more than 90% likely that the alternator has just failed given the age of the vehicle and the mileage on the vehicle. The brushes will wear out in the alternator. So we want to at least qualify this wire, and because there's a couple of computers in control of this, we want to do a network scan and see if there's any codes related to the control wires, although I doubt they would actually cause a no charge condition. I think these are more or less monitoring circuits and modification circuits, but we'll scan it for codes nonetheless. So I've got the scanner connected to the vehicle. I got a battery charger on it set at 13.5 volts, and got the key in the run position and the engine not running. We're going to do a network code scan and see. I imagine we're going to have some low voltage codes, but I'm concerned about any control codes for the alternator that might be present. Auto IDs, let's do a network code scan, pre-scan. Is it left-hand drive? Yes, it is. So this will take several minutes. Oh, check component G2 generator. Well, that's what we're doing. Code 2248 and 49. Under voltage at terminal 30 in the airbag computer. Component or the signal line to the component M51 windshield washer fluid pump has open circuit or short to ground. Really? Right front seat heater has an open circuit. Wiper off relay has a short circuit, less than 10.5 volts at circuit 30. More than 17 volts, that's interesting. Voltage less than 10.5. Lots of voltage. Coolant level is too low. You got to set a code for that? Wow. Well, that's coolant level, not washer fluid level, silly. I guess that's kind of important. Control module, rear acquisition and acquisition SAM is not sending any data. Supply voltage of the control unit is too low, under voltage. Yeah. Selector lever was moved to position by the driver at a speed greater than 8 kilometers, 5 miles an hour. If no customer complaint exists, the fault can be erased. In other words, don't do that. Yeah, not sending data, status of component, whatever. Local voltage, component, output of computer. Wow. We have a few codes. Heated rear window relay. Well, we're not going to get overly concerned about all of these codes because some of them are generated by low voltage and the charging system concern. Now, they do not publish troubleshooting charts in the service information for this particular fault, 2249 and 2248. So I'm going to do a keyword search on Identifix and see if there's any cases of this. So here's a case on the Identifix website. No alternator output. As I suspected, this alternator has an internally regulated and connected by a LIN bus to the powertrain control module, so the regulator control can be intervened. Verify battery positive voltage at the connection on the alternator. If it has good connection, some engines will have an inline fuse from the starter to the alternator. The alternator case must also have a good ground. Well, I'm sure it does because it hasn't been tampered with. Perform diagnostic code check of all control units. Testing can also be done with factory scan tool with the guided test function. See, the factory tool, you would actually load a guided diagnostic, but obviously the aftermarket tools don't have that. This is the test procedure listed by Mercedes for LIN bus alternators in document AR15.40-P-5000P. Test wiring for signal line between the CDI control unit and the glow plug module and alternator. Now, when I turned the key on to do this network scan, I paid attention this time and I saw the glow plug indicator light come on. So I'm sure the LIN bus, which is teed into the glow plus controller, is working fine. And I think we just got a failed alternator. 2248, 2249. Let's see if there's any troubleshooting charts. Yeah, gotta request it. If you put in a request, a formal request to Identifix, they will send you some literature based on what the scan tool provides. But I think we're just going to confirm there's power at the back of the alternator, and if there is, we're going to order up an alternator. So we're back working on this ML320. In the last clip, I did manage to get at the connector on the back of the alternator. It's very difficult to see its way down there. There was power at the back of the alternator, and there was fault codes related to the charging system. So we're going to go ahead and replace the alternator. Looks like it's going to be a bit of a challenge. I'm hoping I don't have to take that charger cooler pipe off, but I may have to. Anyways, I looked at it from underneath and it's not much better, so I'm going to try from the top here. So you need an 18mm 12-point socket on the belt tensioner. There, you can see it down there, and turn it counterclockwise. Push down on the wrench from here and slip the belt off the alternator. The belt looks like it's in good shape, so we're going to leave it right there. So there's a coolant pump, an auxiliary coolant pump that sits on a bracket here. If you take that bracket off, one 13mm bolt, and disconnect the electrical plug, you get a little bit more room. There's 4 E12 bolts that hold the alternator onto the engine block, and you can get those off best with a flex-headed ratchet like this. These are what the bolts look like. I got all the bolts out. Now I'm hoping to move the alternator forward enough to disconnect the electrical. I've got the feed stud disconnected here, but I'm going to make sure that that stud's dead back there, because I'm not 100% certain if that is good enough. The battery's under the passenger seat, so I'd rather not go there if I don't have to. So I've taken the plastic cap off of the alternator feed stud, and I was checking to see if there was power still down there, and you can see my test light lights up. but it wouldn't find a ground on the engine because I had disconnected the ground from the engine at the alternator bracket, so it doesn't light up a test light down there. So even though the battery's still connected, this main wire, I believe, goes to the alternator. So take that off at this boost stud here, and the alternator is dead. Well, it almost comes out of there, but I disconnected the upper charge air cooler pipe, and it's got to come past this. It's very close, like, and I'm gonna have to cut some of these connector tie wraps on this harness to push this harness back out of the way. So I'm hoping it's going to come up through this hole. I might have to, well, let's give it a try. So I did have to remove this little plastic adapter that goes to the charge air cooler and the intake. There are 3 E-drive bolts. So you can actually remove these bolts with a 5/16 or an 8mm 6-point socket, and then one looks like T20. And the alternator is out. It comes out through this spot here. Cut the clip on this wiring harness so you can move it off to the side, push the charge air cooler pipe back that way. Now we'll clean up the connections and put the new alternator in. So I'm just comparing the original alternator, which is 180 amps, to the replacement one. This is the one I got here from Wilson. It was supposed to be 180 amps. Now I notice in the control circuit here there are 2 wires, 2 terminals in there, and on this one there's only a single terminal. So we're going to have a look at the connector down there, and hopefully there's only 1 wire to it, and that single second terminal is not really required. This is LIN bus to the PCM, I believe, which controls the charging system. Everything else looks good. It's got a 1-way clutch on the front of it, and it's not slipping on this original one. So we're going to go ahead and compare this electrical connector down there. So looking at the connector down here, where is it? You can see there's only a single wire in there, and so that alleviates that problem. I was concerned that it might be missing or have the wrong voltage regulator in it, but it only has that 1 terminal. Make sure it's in the right spot too. So reconnect the positive cable before you mount the alternator, because it's much easier to get at the stud. Reconnect the LIN bus wire to the back of the regulator. Put the top front bolt in first, and don't bother putting the ground on because you can leave that ground out of the way. It's much easier to work a ratchet with that ground out of the way. So I've got the other 3 bolts tightened up. Now I'm going to put the ground wire on and put the belt back on and finish the reassembly. So put the serpentine belt back on before putting this charge air pipe back on, and make sure it's lined up in all the pulleys. Put the auxiliary water pump back in place with the bolt and plug it in. Make sure it's got clearance between the bracket and or the hose and the pulley on the alternator. And we already put the induction elbow back on. Now this thing had a temp sensor in it that was pressed in here, and I had to unclip it. So make sure you put that in. That goes up against the block. Can install it after. So when you snap this induction hose back in, make sure it clips all the way in. Put the clip on the pipe or on the adapter and then snap it in place. Put some dielectric grease on the O-ring seal. Make sure it's not cut. I've got the wire reconnected. Only thing I got left to do is put this induction hose or induction tube in here between the air cleaner housing and the front air intake. But we're going to start it up and make sure it's charging. Well, as you can see, it's charging 14.9. The glow plugs are likely still cycling too, so. And the battery was down to 12.2 open circuit, so it's kind of low because it's been running for a bit without a charging system. Let's have a look at the alternator ripple. Looks a bit aggressive, but
okay. You gotta remember the alternator is working like crazy right now to recharge the battery. So we're gonna say this one is fine. The alternator does come out of there from the top. 14.1. Thanks for watching.